The year is 2021, and you know what that means? We're officially 1 year closer to our inevitable deaths at the hands of entropy! And, of course, that also means that it's been 15 years since the release of good old Persona 3 for the PS2 in Japan, along with it being the 25th anniversary of the Persona series since the release of Megami Ibon Roku Persona on the original PlayStation all the way back in 1996. And these two events coming together can only mean one thing: a Persona 3 remake, right guys? Because I have decided that that arbitrary combination of numbers has to mean something because I otherwise lack meaning in my life. Now, the idea behind a P3 remake is something a ton of fans, myself included, have had in our minds for quite a while now. You see, while the game itself still holds up really well as a whole in my opinion, there is no denying that certain aspects of it have aged about as well as a ham that's been left out of the damn fridge for 2 weeks. Most notably, the character models, they have that distinct PS2 look to them, you know? They all look like badly assembled Playmobil figures, if I'm being honest. So, a nice graphical overhaul with the character models that Atlus already made and completely fucking wasted on that shitty-ass dancing game would be very welcome indeed. But you see, while a lot of people say that they want a quote-unquote remake, a vast majority just want a graphical overhaul with the new character models and maybe, you know, new environments. However, there is also another very small subsection of fans who want more than that. A full-on remake! You know, one in the style of Final Fantasy VII Remake or Resident Evil 2 and 3, and prepare to take a shot every time I say the fucking word throughout this video, or remaster, whichever one you fancy. But first, I want to take a step back and explain what exactly constitutes a remake, a remaster, and a port, and what makes them all different, because it is a distinction I feel is rather important for a later point in the video. Now, this is a rather difficult topic to set boundaries for. I mean, sure, people like Scott the Woz have made entire videos dedicated to defining which constitutes which, but I do feel that this is a very tricky topic, and remaster and ports are very, very interchangeable with one another. And a lot of people, I've found, they have their own personal definitions for which is which. So, without further ado, this is what I'll be defining each category for the sake of the argument of this video. Remake. A complete, from-the-ground-up reconstruction of the original game for entirely new hardware in mind, with completely new assets from character models, textures, re-recorded music, a completely remade physics engine, and sometimes even completely new and different gameplay, creating an entirely new experience from every aspect, except for maybe the name and the story that's being told. See the aforementioned Final Fantasy VII Remake, the Resident Evil remakes, Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, and even Black Mesa. Remaster. A brand new release of an already existing game that may offer up more value and a definitive way to play and experience it. It can include new assets, making the pre-existing visuals crisper in some cases, or even creating stuff like new character models or textures. But most importantly of all, it's about offering value in that old game, bundling it with all previous release DLC, fixing bugs, glitches, etc. It's all about making it the absolute definitive version of the game you should be playing right now. See the multiple Kingdom Hearts collections, Final Fantasy VIII Remastered, Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, and even Nocturne HD. Even if it technically doesn't fix a lot of Nocturne's more glaring issues, but that's a topic for another day, okay, bye. Re-release / port. Nothing really too fancy, it's just a simple, well, port of a game. Just basic upscaling, if possible, of already existing assets. While a remaster may retexture or remodel some stuff, a port is just nothing new really, just upscale what's already there. There's no reconstructed or tweaked mechanics, just making it available on a new platform with almost none, if any, new bells and whistles. Whereas a remaster is more about value, I feel that a port has more to do with accessibility of preferred platform and nothing much beyond that. See the PC version of Halo Master Chief Collection, Persona 4 Golden on Steam, the Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 ports to Switch, and even Horizon Zero Dawn on Steam. All of these versions, well, all they do is give wider availability to those games on new platforms, but nothing more beyond that. With the main parameters as to what defines what being said, I feel that I can first talk about the absolute most arse-wipingly boring thing Atlus could do with the game. A possible P3 Fest port to Steam. Now, much like the P4G port in 2020, it would just be, well, P3 Fest. But now you don't need an emulator and a dubious copy of the E, so you download off some shady website to play it on your PC at a high resolution. Yeah, while it would still be cool to see Persona 3 be made more accessible on a platform that isn't so fucking prone to hardware failures, I do have to admit that just a straight port to PC with 4K support would be rather underwhelming, to say the least. I mean, sure, seeing the game run natively on widescreen and at a high resolution, it would still be awesome for sure, but it wouldn't be a fitting way to celebrate the anniversary of such an important game to Atlus, and I'd even argue Persona and SMT, since, it was the point where the series started getting more popular. Because, as I've said earlier, a port more often than not is just the same game being made available in more platforms. And while P3 Fest is the most well-known version, it isn't the definitive version of Persona 3, as it lacks the content that would otherwise make it worth picking up.
Surprise, motherfucker!
Where am I going with this? Well, for those of you who don't know, while Persona 4 and Persona 5 both received a single enhanced version in the forms of Golden and Royal, respectively, P3 actually got two enhanced versions. Persona 3 FES on the PS2 in 2007, and Persona 3 Portable in the PSP in 2010, and both of these are very different in terms of their content. For one, FES adds the new love-it-or-hate-it epilogue to the main story, The Answer, which I'll talk more about in depth at some later point in its own video, but for now, all you need to know is that it was not included in P3P. You see, PSP UMDs could hold less data than regular DVDs, and thus, The Answer had to sadly be cut out, along with a fully three-dimensional exploration of the real world, which is now handled in a more visual novel sort of style. However, this version of the game has boobs, more than the average Japanese game anyways. Yes, the option to play through the story as a female protagonist was added as compensation for the removal of The Answer. And it adds quite a bit of extra stuff, like the new UI that's pink instead of blue, a few of the social links get replaced with completely new characters, you get to ruin and undermine Shinji's character arc, and controllable party members are now a thing, amongst a bunch of extra stuff. And this is the problem with P3, and why it desperately needs a remake, remaster, definitive edition, whatever. The lack of a unified version of the game that brings all of the content together. Because FES is lacking a lot of the extra content and quality of life changes Portable introduced, but at the same time, Portable is missing the fully 3D overworld and The Answer. So when it comes to recommending what version of P3 to play, it can be a bit hard to have a good answer. Thus, a definitive edition of P3 that mixes both contents, it makes sense. So, let's kick off with what so many people want, a remake. So, a Persona 3 remake has been but a twinkle in many a fan's eye, mostly because Atlus are imbeciles and won't make the damn thing. Now, the main argument a lot of fans have is the fact that Atlus made the brand new HD character models for those fucking bastard piece of shit dancing games, along with a few environments getting remade as well, like the Gekugan High School rooftop or the final stage against Nyx. And yeah, I agree that these parts could contribute to a possible remake, but I still feel that, at least for now, one wouldn't be viable for Atlus to make. As we've established previously, a remake basically takes as much time and energy as, a brand new game. Just look at FF7R and RE2 Make. The first one was announced in 2015, and most likely in development for at least 2 years at that point, and it just came out last year. And even then, it's still just a remake of the Midgard section, or about 1/3 of the way through the first CD of the original game. The Resident Evil 2 remake was announced also in 2015, though apparently it was conceived as early as the Resident Evil 1 remake on the GameCube, and came out in 2019. Hell, even Black Mesa, that one was announced in 2004 when Half-Life 2 first released, went into early access in 2015, and just last year the 1.0 version finally came out. And I could sit here listing millions and millions of other examples, but my point here is that remakes require just as much manpower and energy as a brand new game. And keep in mind, those first two examples that I gave were made by multi-million-dollar corporations. Atlus isn't anywhere near the size of Square Enix or Capcom, even with the recent influx in popularity thanks to Persona 5. And so, at least for now, I don't think they'd have the necessary manpower to carry out a project like this. Besides, keep in mind, they still have two massive projects under their wing at this point. Project ReFantasy and Shin Megami Tensei 5. Two massive games that require tons of resources, and we still know nothing about them outside of pre-rendered teaser trailers at the time of recording. Not to mention those links that suggest that we still have a ton of smaller Persona 5 related spin-offs and projects. And, I do know most of them were likely outsourced to other teams, with how Persona 5 Strikers was co-developed by Koei Tecmo's Omega team. But they still need supervisors and executive producers from Atlus overseeing them. And, who knows what else they have going on in there. So, yeah, for now, I don't think they're in a condition to undertake a massive project like this. Now, another problem I feel a possible remake runs into is a very important question. How do you improve Persona 3? To which you may respond with, "Oh well, Manji, it's really easy. You see, just put the shiny new character models that were wasted in the dancing games and the new reconstructed environments, add a few new character models for the FemC exclusive content, and voila." You see, that's an issue in my eyes. You see, in my opinion, the best remakes not only retread old ground, but do a lot to try and improve upon what few shortcomings the original game may have had. In Final Fantasy VII Remake's case, it's the shift to a more character-driven story and deeper exploration of minor characters like Jessie, the better establishment of certain characters' relationships with each other like Barrett with Marlene or Tifa with Aerith. In Black Mesa's case, sure, they made the Zen levels a bit longer, but they made them a much more enjoyable and coherent experience than whatever the hell was going on in the original game. Metroid Zero Mission makes it much harder to get lost because they'd added a map feature and it made each room more visually distinct from each other, and so on and so on and so on. So again, I ask, what can you do to improve Persona 3? Well, the big obvious thing everyone would point at is tartar sauce. I mean Tartarus. Which, yeah, gets pretty dull and repetitive, like, 1/4 into the game. But there really isn't much you can do to spice it up and make it less dull, in my opinion. Since it is procedurally generated from a pool of predetermined rooms, the only thing I can think of that would make it more interesting is maybe add a few trap or gimmick tile rooms? Just the problem with that is that Tartarus is 6 blocks tall with a total of 263 individual floors. So there's really only so much you could do before those trap and gimmick rooms they get boring again. Sure, at first they may offer up some variety, but there's gonna be a point where you've seen them all and they just become part of the routine and scenery and you're back to square one. The big problem with Tartarus is that it's way too long and relies too much on the procedural generation and copy-pasted assets, which creates repetitiveness really quick, really fast. Just adding more to the pile of the randomly generated rooms wouldn't really work as a solution to the problem, it would just add to it. The only solution really would be to make Tartarus a bit shorter, cut down the number of floors each block has, make each floor maybe slightly bigger, that's about my opinion on it. The real place where a P3 remake could maybe strive to improve is maybe the writing and making a few of the social links more memorable, and that would be achieved by making them a bit longer. Basically what FF7R did with its minor characters, where basically each rank of the S-Link would have to be, more dialogue heavy than the original game, maybe add a few extra scenes for characters that feel a bit undercooked, like Ken. But off the top of my head, that's about it. A lot of P3's gameplay issues come from its own inherent design and how it works. Thus, the only way to fix it is by changing it from scratch. And that leads to problems because then you have people complaining about it being different and therefore ruined. So it is a bit of a crossroads in that regard, and not to mention there would still be a lot of work left to create the new assets, as again, the only real assets Atlus have at the moment are the character models and the few environments that were remade for P3D. But P3 is a pretty big game for the PS2 era, and thus those areas and assets still would need to be recreated from scratch and programmed and that whole process, blah blah blah. So it isn't as easy as just dropping the new character models with a few new animations. There's still menus, new environments, text that needs to be redone, character portraits. It's just a massive workload at the moment. So if a remake is, in my opinion, a bit of a hard thing to do, what else can Atlus do? Well, all that's left is a remaster. Now, there are two specific remasters that I have in mind that I feel could offer a good blueprint for what could be a pretty sweet deal. Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary and Final Fantasy VIII Remastered, because both represent what I feel Atlus should go for, but one shows the right way to do it, and the other one shows the less than ideal way to do it. So, what is it that these two games have in common? Well, I'll tell you, it's easy. They're both graphical, visual, and audio overhauls on a superficial level. There's absolutely no changes outside of the visual upgrade. Internal game logic, mechanics, movement, everything is the same. And that's what I feel we should get. A Persona 3 remaster that stitches together FES and Portable into a single package and updates the models to the ones seen in the fuck you pay us dancing games. And while it could still be a bit hard to do, it wouldn't drain nearly as many resources as a full-on remake would take, and I still see it being very doable even with what could possibly be a smaller crew of people, since it would only require optimization of the game to run in an environment outside the PS2, making it run in widescreen and in a native 1080p resolution, drop the new character models in the already existing environments with a few tweaked and adapted animations, and voila. Now, I know it sounds like a lot, and yeah, it is, but trust me, it's still way less than the workload a full-on remake would require. And I feel that there is one big thing that would alleviate a lot of this, and that would be AI image upscaling for textures. Now, AI image upscaling is a technology that's been around for a while, and it's actually been used to enhance entire backgrounds in games like the PC port of Final Fantasy IX via a fan-made mod. And the same thing, by the way, is being worked on for the Final Fantasy VII original PC port. And honestly, it looks fucking amazing. These are whole-ass pre-rendered image backgrounds, by the way. Imagine applying this to simple wall textures like in Tartarus and even the real world. I feel it could really work really well and alleviate a lot of the workload that the remaster would take by making, character models a higher priority, since textures would be mostly handled by the AI upscale program. Quickly going into the topic of the anime cutscenes. Well, in this case, all I can think of is to just upscale them to 1080p and maybe crop off the blue borders on the top and bottom of the frame and just leave the footage in the middle. But the cutscenes themselves are in 16:9 and seem to be more in a 5:3 aspect ratio. But I suppose people won't notice the tiny black spaces on either side of the screen. Unfortunately, I do see Atlus cropping them to the full 16:9 aspect ratio, which in my opinion is a massive bummer. Never crop image ratios, you lose footage, for God's sake, man. Now, for FemC, obviously you can't just create new anime cutscenes for her, because as for one, it would take a lot of time, money, and effort, and we don't have that sort of stuff. As for two, they would look inconsistent with the ones that are already there. So the only option for her really, I feel, would be doing what P3P did, which is replacing the anime cutscenes with real-time in-engine ones. Which, I will admit, I do think is thematically appropriate for her because, that was something that P3P exclusively did, and she was also a P3P exclusive character, so hey, if the shoe fits, now. Earlier I said that I chose both Halo CE Anniversary and Final Fantasy VIII Remastered because I feel they both show how to do this correctly and incorrectly. First, I want to talk about Halo CE, as I feel it is the lesser of these two examples, and the one that I definitely don't want Atlus using as a blueprint. For those of you who don't know, Halo 1 Anniversary was originally a quote-unquote remaster of the original Xbox version of the game for Xbox 360. It used new textures, lighting, and even reused some character models from Halo Reach. Now, look at this footage of the mission 343 Guilty Spark in the original graphic style. Looks cool, huh? Very moody, dark, and mysterious. Yeah? You like that? Well, look at how much the new graphics screw it up. Yep. This is one of the more egregious examples of the new graphics and lighting completely fucking up with moods, by the way. It doesn't work so well. Not to mention, it also fucks over gameplay mechanics too. Look at this dark part. With original graphics, the flashlight is pretty much necessary to see. Switch over to the new graphics and boom. Creepy mood and flashlight thrown out the window. Hey, I'm gonna snipe this asshole. I have clear sights on him and... Oh, also, what? What the fuck happened? Oh. The new graphics put an unnecessary bush that wasn't there before and it blocked my sniper scope, and now we're all fucked because I failed a shot. It just adds a ton of unnecessary visual noise to the original graphics and fucks over what was very solid visual design. Which, granted, yeah, it was very simplistic, but simple doesn't necessarily mean bad, and the game's combat was originally designed with the simple look in mind. The new graphics just trample all over Halo 1 in my opinion. So I feel a P3 Remastered should avoid doing the over-exaggerated changes Halo CE Anniversary did. And moving on to the actually good example that I want Atlus to follow, Final Fantasy VIII Remaster is a gorgeous update to an old game, and the definitive version to play FF8 with in my opinion. You see, when it comes to old games like this, up to the PS1 and maybe even PS2 eras, whether these companies like it or not, they're always gonna be competing with emulators. And I think that instead of trying to take down emulation sites like they usually do, I feel they should do something like this, offering a better alternative to emulation. And this remaster does that beautifully in my opinion. It has been visually enhanced without compromising the original's visual design at all. It's basically the same game, but a lot of models have been redone and retextured. It looks so great in my opinion, and I definitely recommend you play this version over emulation. It's that good. Now, you can say whatever you want about Final Fantasy VIII. Sure, the story has so much pointless melodrama that it seems to have been written by David Cage or a telenovela writer at points. But you can't deny that this upgrade looks amazing. And this is what I want P3 to go for. Keep the original game, just make the models and textures prettier, and just that. Keep it great. It fulfills what I said earlier. It's the absolute definitive version of the game, and like I said, I recommend this is how you play Final Fantasy VIII. I'm gonna leave a link to a much more detailed comparison video down below so you can compare the different versions of Final Fantasy VIII and truly see what I'm talking about. So yeah, hey, check it out. It's in the description down below. And that's that. A possible P3 remaster in the style of the one Final Fantasy VIII got would be amazing and my ideal way to experience Persona 3 in a modern console. And in my opinion, it would still be a great way to celebrate the legacy of the series, the best Hashino Persona game, and the point where the series started falling more into the public eye. But what do you guys think? What would be your ideal P3 re-release? A port? A remake? A remastered? I mean, in my opinion, just the Persona 2 Duology remaster, you know, the only good one. But just leave your comments down below. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, share it around if you'd like, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon if you enjoy the content that you see. And with that, I'll be see you all in the next video. Signing out, it's me, goodbye.